So it's so good to have you. I've been meaning to do this for a while, and this is going to be episode 44. And I thought wine would have come onto the show way earlier,
I know.
but here we are finally doing this.
Absolutely. And I'm genuinely very thrilled to be here today. Thank you,
Same,
Anish.
same here. Uh, I want to tell the listeners about your journey, how you got here, and the exam that you've passed. Because I don't know if people realize this, and this may be quite bizarre for a lot of people, but some of the toughest exams in the world are wine exams, and a lot of them are even rated higher than IIT.
Yeah.
And
Arguably
passed,
so.
yeah, and you've passed those. You've passed one of them, and that's incredible journey. So let's talk about a little bit about how you got into wine
Hmm.
and how that prep of that exam was, and how was to pass it.
Yes. So, arguably among the toughest exams in the world, no doubt. But when I first got into wine, it was kind of a real pivot in my career because I used to be in a corporate career as a director of sales for a NASDAQ listed multinational company. But it was an industry not of my choice. I wasn't enjoying working there. And yet I stuck it out for 7.5 years there. And finally, I felt the need to reinvent myself. And I had the courage and the conviction to pivot in my career. And I was looking for a number of industries to get into. So it wasn't like wine was the first choice or anything. But my husband had an epiphany. And he said, you know what, you should look at wine as an industry. It's a total sunrise industry at the moment. There are very few qualified wine professionals in this country.
Yeah.
And whoever few there are, you'll just eat them up. So just go for it. But we both agreed that we would have to gain credibility because wine is a snobby affair.
Yeah.
And you know, Anish, there's a hell of a lot of people who just read a couple of books on wine or just because they drink very expensive wines, kind of start to become these self-proclaimed experts. And I just didn't want to be one among them because I took a long-term view of the industry and I worked on the basis that a time would come where there would be a need for solid qualified wine professionals and I should probably take that route. And this was at a time when I knew nothing about wine. Okay, so mine literally is a story from knowing nothing about wine to becoming a master of wine, like you know how you typically say zero to hero kind of a story. But I started from scratch, and so the vision was always to try and become India's first master of wine. But the Master of Wine, the title, global title, being as coveted, as difficult as it is to get, it's not the first thing you attempt. You start off learning about wines, you do a lot of preliminary courses. So I had to sign up for all these courses out of London because there was no means to study about it in India at the time. And I would find myself flying out frequently to London, taking these courses, coming back. So did one level after another, and then finally became the first Indian to be accepted on the Master of Wine program. And little did I know that the toughest part lies ahead of me. You know, just when I thought, oh my God, I've really got to nearly the top of Mount Everest. No, that was the toughest part of getting to the top. Because what ensued after that was 5 years of tremendous sacrifice, hard work, perseverance. And, you know, when we say, I mean, the favorite thing I tell people, and it kind of goes off nice in terms of trying to remember it, but more people have been into space than our masters of wine today.
I just told that to Saurabh and the team here. This again is just fascinating. More people have been in space than who've passed this exam.
Exactly.
That is
Less than 500 have ever passed this exam, and living MWs there are like less than 430 in the world as we speak across 30 countries. And I had my eyes on this title. And I was the only Indian on this program. I was surrounded by people who had much better access to wines, much better access to learning facilities. And here I was, fully disadvantaged in every way. But yet, I think sometimes, you know, your adversities work better for you because it builds your resolution. It makes you, if you're sacrificing all that time, being away from home, spending that kind of money and giving yourself out there, you want to make it worth it. So I think I had to try doubly hard. And I just knew the title was meant for me. You know, you have to start living it.
Yeah.
And they often say that becoming a master of wine is you have to become one in your head first, and that's when you actually gain the title. So you really have to develop that mindset, and not to mention, of course, try and pass some of the world's toughest exams. So there are 5 theoretical papers that pretty much assess the breadth and the depth of your knowledge of global wines, like a fine-toothed comb. And then, of course, there is this blind tasting exam spread over 3 days where we taste 36 wines blind. First day is dedicated to 12 white wines, all of which look the same. Second day is dedicated to 12 red wines, all of which taste the same. And as if this wasn't enough, the third day is like a mixed bag. So anything can come up, including your rosés and fortified wines and sparklers and some still wines as well. And you have to try and identify the grape variety, the region of origin, how they've been made, commercial potential, sometimes vintage even, style, quality, all of that. So it's very so the exam overall doesn't just try and assess your knowledge of wine globally, but it's also a test of your English writing skills. It's a test of how you manage stress, because you have just over 2 hours to try and put down this paper, and and just your ability to persevere through tremendous amount of pressure, failure, and all of that. So it's a combination, and I think that is the thing. A lot of people give up on the journey because they just think I'm not cut out for this. So I seriously believe the ones who persevere get to the end.
See, the theory part for me has always been that, okay, you know what, someone can mug it and someone can do it,
Yeah,
right? Even English, whatever, you'll figure out how to write essays and you'll mug every possible thing. I think that's how a lot of our education growing up has been.
correct.
But when it comes to the practicals of a wine exam,
Yeah,
that no one can mug, or there's no shortcut to that, right?
I know. Even I would go as far as to say, Anish, even the theory you can't mug and write, because you're writing essays. So you're kind of expected to be sort of a journalist of sorts, because they have a particular way they expect you to format the answers, and it has to have an argumentative nature where you are discussing the pros and cons and the all dynamics of a particular question, which not only requires knowledge, but as I said, your serious English writing skills.
Yeah.
And you can't mug. So when I got into the exam, I really thought, because I've been a mugger all my life. Throughout school, I was like, study the textbook end to end. So I thought, of course I can do this. This is going to be super easy. But it wasn't. It's a real root shock to your system, because there's nothing to mug here, and you really have to apply your knowledge very creatively and think 360 degrees. So it was very, very difficult, to say the least. I'm just so glad and relieved I got to the end.
How many years from knowing nothing about wine to becoming a master
It was
of
a
wine?
total 10-year journey.
That's
Total.
incredible.
So 5 years before I got on the Master of Wine
Yeah.
program, and then 5 years on the Master of Wine program. It was a total 10-year long journey. But the important thing, Anish, is, and I'm so glad about this, is I kept at it continuously, one course after another. I never took my foot off the pedal, because I think if I had and I'd slowed down, I would have never got to it again. And a lot of people do that. You gain a title or gain a qualification and you say, I'm going to take a year off. I'm going to try and come back to it. But I think you lose momentum and you forget. The thing about wine knowledge, or any knowledge for that matter, is if you don't apply it, it's subject to evaporation. You lose that understanding. So thankfully, I didn't do that. I kept at it, but 10-year long journey.
Oh, touch wood. I think you've been doing so much more since the MW.
Yeah.
You've been very active. We'll also get into your academy and everything that you've been up to. What were the kind of, give me a sample question that you had in the exam?
The question can be something very generic. Discuss the role water plays in the production of high quality wines.
And this can't be a
Now
two-line
that
answer.
can't be a two-line answer, and neither can it be a mug patti wala answer, right? Like, you really have to apply. You have to start thinking now. Where should I even start thinking?
Yeah.
That's where you start. So you have to start thinking water all around the world. Where is water less? Where is water too much? What are the good examples? What are the negative examples? So to study for the master, it's almost like a PhD program. To study for the Master of Wine program, you must be travel to all the wine regions, met with winemakers, have first-hand understanding and knowledge, because you have to give these examples in your exam. And so that is what makes it very difficult. So it wasn't just about being on the program. It was about extended periods of time away from home, traveling to wine producers, wine regions around the world, learning the craft, tasting hundreds and thousands of wines, drawing from any help that anyone was willing to offer, missing out on your daughter's birthday, missing out on your best friend's birthday. I mean, they still don't let me hear the end of it. But all of these sacrifices, it was tough when I was doing it, because there were moments where I would have many breakdowns, and I'd say to my husband, I'm going to give up on this, or why can't I just take a year off? Or what if my daughter was only 2, Anish. So I had a toddler back at home. It's very tough. And I tell you, the mother's guilt is so damn real. So I was tortured I was torn from so many sides. And I would say to my husband, let me take some time off. But he kept prodding me along. I was just very, very fortunate to have a tremendous support system in my husband and my mom, dad, sister, everyone. And they had my back. And they were like, every time you're going to go, don't worry, we're going to move in with you and at your home, look after your daughter. It's all going to be fine. She's never going to miss you, so on. And that was so helpful. And my husband kept saying, come on, if you don't do it, someone else is going to. And that was enough to get me back on the horse and start, galloping along.
Many years back at one of the Win Expos in Hong Kong, I sat in for a mock MW exam with there was Caro and one more person who was leading it, and she was so sweet. I actually learned.
Kathy might have been from South Africa, was it?
No, that time the other lady was the institute head or something.
Jane Masters.
Jane.
Yeah.
So both of them were doing this, and me and Piyush that time.
Yeah.
We sat in for this mock exam, and it was a flight of 4 wines, and there were 2 questions: identify the grape and identify each region.
Yeah.
But when you say identify the grape, you can't just say Shiraz and end it. You have to give proper reasoning why.
That's exactly it.
And I think that time they told us that even maybe you're wrong with your answer, but if your reasoning is so strong that you led to this, that could also get you some points apparently or something like that.
Yeah, Anish, I'm so glad you know this and that you are appreciative of this process. So absolutely, even on the practical tasting exam, blind tasting exam, you have, when you're asked to identify a grape variety, even if you straightforward say this is a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, because that can be an obvious one in a blind tasting, you get no marks, you don't pass. You have to be able to say what else it could be and why you think it's not that and why it's this and where else other than New Zealand could it be from. And the fact that you've considered all these options, and the fact that if it was from Chile, it would be a bit more herbaceous, and if it was from South Africa, it would have more stone fruit. But the fact that this has the freshness and the perfect combination of lime fruit with grass or whatever, makes it a Marlborough New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. So you have to be able to argue like a lawyer. And that is what makes it so much more difficult, because you have to constantly try and compare it to what else could a Sauvignon Blanc be and where else could it be from. So you have to have this whole structure of the world map ready in your damn head to be able to just put it out. And that takes a lot of practice.
And then the interesting thing was the second part of the question, identify each region. There was that time Chinese MW, she was learning, she'd not passed her exam yet. And the way she answered every region of those 4 wines, I still remember it was like, you know what, this wine, there's one step in the old world, there's one step in the new world, it's this is so obviously this region in Chile, and we're like, damn son, like how did you do that?
I know. But you get there in the end. It takes a lot of practice. But trust me, that's how I was towards the part where I was ready to pass, I'd got to that level of proficiency. And I'm telling you, when you pass, people often ask, what was the difference in the time that you passed versus the time that you failed? And I'll tell you, the time when you pass is the time when you're going to the exam with the mindset that you put whatever the hell you want in front of me. I'm ready to answer this like an expert, like a true master. I'm going to tell you. And I don't care whether that my answer is right or wrong, but I'm going to speak with so much authority. And I'm going to be, my format or my arguments are just going to be so compelling and strong and logical, above all, that's what's going to get me the marks. And that is really the thing that takes you past the finishing line. The mindset. And you truly start to feel like a master of wine the year you pass. So they truly gruel you, get you to that mindset. They really make you feel like one, and then they give you the title. And then it's like, a meltdown. I'm even having goosebumps telling you this now because, every time I say this, I relive those moments in a way.
Did you get some things horribly wrong in a blind tasting? Then it's like, damn, how could that
Not
be?
only that, you have to stand up and read it out. Just as you were saying, in this mock exam, you had people stand up and read. So there was this one time I remember my most shameful moment. It was a classic Burgundian Côte d'Or Burgundy Chardonnay, probably like a Morochet or a Puligny Morochet or something. And I read it out like a Rioja Viura, which it's just not even a classic, right? And it was just such a shameful answer. And everyone was like, so that's the thing. But you have to have the courage. You get past all of it. You learn to do it. But you really have to have the humility on this course to be able to make a complete fool of yourself, still persevere and say, I can do this. I'm just going to learn from all these mistakes and I'm going to get past it to the finishing line.
Yeah. I think we should open up some wines now.
I know. I'm ready, right?
So Sonal has a reel about how to open a bottle of champagne, which has crossed 5 million views.
That is correct.
So I do have a bottle of champagne. I think you can open that.
Oh. Okay, rule number 1. The bottle of champagne or sparkling wine must be perfectly chilled, because when it's chilled, the mousse, the creaminess is well contained and the effervescence is not aggressive. And that's very important, because when you're trying to uncork, the last thing you want is the cork just sort of splurging open and the bubbles just flying out and the cork flying out. And you don't want any accidents, right? Then once you've removed this rather ugly excise sticker,
Yeah,
you will...
Bombay excise.
I hate that, seriously. Okay, let me try and get past that. But you will invariably see a tab. You see this tab here?
Yeah.
Aneesh, of course, you know how to do this, but I'm just demonstrating this for the sake of our viewers, for those who are interested. So you'll see a tab. You kind of tear open that tab all the way around, and that will expose the cork and the wire cage. There's always a cage which is there to keep the cork in its place, because there is a lot of pressure inside this bottle of champagne, almost 2 to 3 times of a car tire. And I don't know if you've ever heard a car tire burst, but it's very loud. So you don't want any accidents. So that's why this cage exists. Now it's time to loosen the wire cage. But the minute you start to loosen, you'll see this little key here. You pull it down and you start sort of unwinding it. But the minute you do that, do we have a good view of this? Okay. I'm trying to do this in front of the camera, but the minute you start doing that, make sure your thumb is on top of the cork so that the cork doesn't go flying out. Okay, and now we're loosening the wire cage, and now it's amply loose. And what a lot of people do is they take their thumb off and then try to take the cage off and try to remove the cork separately. You don't do that. You remove the cork and this wire cage both together at the same time. So now we've loosened the wire cage, and hopefully this cork will come out rather easy. So what you do is you hold the bottle, you bend it down to 45 degrees, you take a firm grip at the bottom. If it's very wet, you can use a napkin to just wipe it and sort of dry it up. And then you hold it firmly and try and twist the bottle at the bottom. And you uncork. You do not shake the bottle. Spilling champagne is considered very rude by the French. So you don't do that. You just kind of gently remove the cork, and voila, we're out.
Yeah.
The cork and the cage is out. And then you simply pour. If you want to stop pouring, just give the bottle a little tilt and it stops the pour. There you go.
Arjun, some for you. Anyone wants to taste? We have more glasses.
Yeah, seriously.
This is one of the better ones.
And thank you, Aneesh. This is such a treat. Veuve Clicquot Rosé.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's
fantastic.
Thanks to our friends at Moet Hennessy. They're very kind people.
Thank you. Thank you. This is lovely.
Well, cheers.
Cheers. Cheers, and what a treat. Thank you.
That's the other thing about wine, right? You want to enjoy it with people. I think that's been one very big aspect of a lot of me and my friends who got into wine out of a hobby, right?
Correct.
That you always want to taste with people. It's sometimes a little sad that you're not able to share that and that emotion. Like,
I agree.
Like I love that about. So wines obviously start with. It's an agricultural product, right? We're starting with grapes.
Correct.
And there's a term that comes up a lot, which is terroir. And to me, I think, and please correct me if I'm wrong, if we should take a different route, but I think that's a good way to start getting into wines, because how important is that side, which is even before production comes into play, right?
Correct.
So tell me more about terroir. How does that play such an important part? Like, why is a champagne coming
the way
from
it is.
champagne?
Yeah.
Stuff like that, right? Why is Burgundy so sought after?
So the firstly, terroir is a French word, for which famously people say there is no English equivalent. Unfortunately, the English haven't been able to come up with a word for it. But terroir really refers to all the environmental factors, such as the climate, the soil, the sunshine, the rainfall, the land, the terrain, the which way it slopes, what is the composition of it, all of these natural factors that exist in the environment that have an impact, a direct impact on the style and the personality of the wine that is made from the grape varieties. And of course, what grape varieties planted there also has a significant role to play. So terroir really suggests that even if you plot same grape variety on two different plots of land that enjoy different levels of sunshine, different kinds of soil composition, different levels of rainfall, they will produce two different styles of wines. So wine is therefore, as an agricultural product, really a time and a place stamp. And that is what makes every wine unique. They say no two wines are alike. It's almost like a human thumbprint. And just as human thumbprint, there are no two thumbprints that are alike. Similarly, every wine style is nuanced to a degree, and sometimes those nuances are not so subtle. They are so obvious that I have had examples where in Burgundy, a place like Burgundy, a Chardonnay planted on two different plots of land literally adjacent to each other are stylistically still different. So just as an example, what makes Champagne the way Champagne is, the cool climate obviously produces grapes with high acidity, a lot of that zingy, mouth-watering sort of a quality. The chalky soils lend to its minerality. The Chardonnay grape in itself that is planted there, or Pinot Noir or Meunier, a combination of those produce a style of wine that has some level of finesse, some level of freshness, some level of floral notes, minerality again. So it's that signature sort of a style of champagne, which of course is further added through the winemaking and the lease aging and so on. But if the same three grape varieties were planted in a hotter place like Spain, for example, the acidity might be different. It might be lower. The fruit might be riper. Rather than getting more limey fruit, you might end up with more tropical or stone fruit, warmer fruits. So the fruit profile can change. The acidity profile can change. The alcohol profile can change. Wines that come from slightly warmer climates can obviously have higher levels of alcohol as opposed to those that come from cooler climates. So terroir is nothing but the concept that the lay of the land influences the personality and the style of the wine. Consistency, this vintage variation takes place.
Yeah.
And so it's also more predominantly applicable for more finer wines, because with finer wines you see those nuances, whereas if you're looking at commercial quality, simpler, entry level, inexpensive wines, you're really just talking about bulk production of grapes that are grown in massive quantities and are sort of almost forced into ripening and so on, right? So there's less of the nuances of terroir that you experience. So so that's what terroir is. It's
What about old world versus new world? That's another thing that comes up a lot when...
It does, doesn't it? So
Yeah.
old world refers to European countries, and they're called the old world because they've been making wines for 2,000 years. New world refers to all countries that make wine outside of Europe, and they are called new world because they've been making wines only for 200 years. But, and so the concept of old world, new world exists because there's this divide where old world tends to mention more names of regions or names of places of land on their grape variety, which are more, on their wine labels. Sorry, should I say that again?
You can say that again.
So typically wine producers in Europe tend to not mention names of grape varieties, but they tend to mention names of regions or mentions of smaller plots of land on the labels, which are much more difficult for consumers to decode, versus the new world that attempts to simplify wine by putting names of grape varieties on the label. So it's more identifiable, it's more relatable when you read Chardonnay or a Pinot Noir or a Merlot on a label. But I have to say two things here. One is that there is increasingly a convergence of styles.
Okay.
Because global warming is happening and the climate change is real. So increasingly, the hotter places are becoming even hotter. The cooler places are getting significantly warmer. So somehow there's not a problem of ripening of grapes anymore, hardly ever, across. Like Bordeaux has had one great vintage after another, embarrassingly so. So it's just everything is getting warmer. So there's more predictability of that. And so a lot of the old world wines, European wines, are starting to taste like the new world wines, because the new world wines had places like California, Australia had more sunshine, more predictable patterns of weather. So that's happening. And so there's increasingly more convergence of style there, and it's harder to tell in a blind tasting that this wine's from Europe versus this wine being from New World. And the other point I want to make is that some of you may be aware, but There are places like South Australia, for example, in regions of Barossa or McLaren Vale, where there are old vines, very old vines, and they're among the oldest vines. So when I say vine, I mean the vine plants and not the wine liquid. But these are planted, and they have not been affected by phylloxera. So phylloxera was a disease that affected 2/3 of the vineyards around the world, and so all of Europe lost their vines and had to be replanted. So if I really think in terms of where are the oldest vines that are making wine today, they actually exist in south of Australia. So what is to say what is old anymore and what is new? Because actually in these terms then, South Australia is truly the oldest world of wine today. Do you understand, Ajnish?
Yeah,
because you're
completely.
from our industry, so
Yeah.
you get the context, right? So who's to say what is old world and new world? So I don't like to use this terminology anymore because I increasingly find that that line of difference is blurred.
I just find it fascinating that and I guess as an older producer or older region, a consumer is just supposed to know what's inside, what grape was used.
Exactly.
And that's how it is.
At the end of the day, wine's only responsibility is to taste delicious and give extreme pleasure to its drinker, and
That is so beautifully put.
that is it. That's all a wine's supposed to do at the end of the day.
We've gone into a little bit of a geeky territory here, but
Yeah.
if we take a step back, how is wine even made? Wine is a plant that's planted. You
Yep.
pick the grapes.
Yes.
Take me through that process of red, white, and rosé, because
Okay.
rosé is not mixing the two. So let's just give me a very
Okay, but I'm going to give you a very preliminary,
correct,
broad,
very easy
like
to
wine
understand.
101 answer.
Correct,
huh?
correct.
Okay. So wine 101 is you grow grapes, you pick grapes, and then in case of white wines, you crush. Crush is when you break open the skins, and the first free run juice, as they call it, oozes out. That's the purest form
And
of
no
juice.
one's using their feet to do that.
No one's using their feet anymore for any kind of wine. That's just a very tourism kind of a picture. And historically, it used to be done and so on, but not anymore at all. So they are crushed. You break open the skins, and then you press. So when you press, you separate the skins. In case of white wines, you don't need the skins because the color is not, I mean, the color is in the skins, but in case of white wine, you don't need the color. So you press and you separate the skins. You take the remaining juice, with all the pulp and seeds and everything in it, and you sort of put it through fermentation. And you ferment at relatively cooler temperatures as opposed to red wine, because the whole idea of making white wine is to end up with something that is fresh, aromatic, and shows great typicity of variety. You know what I mean by typicity of
I love
variety?
that
It's a bit
word.
like when you eat up hapus mango, you expect certain flavors out of that hapus, versus you'll feel very cheated if someone says, here's a hapus and it tastes like langda, right? You don't want that. So similarly, there is a certain typicity you expect from a certain grape variety, and you want to preserve that typicity, and therefore you ferment at lower temperatures so you don't lose the volatile aromatics and so on. And then finally you either put it through oak aging for some further maturation, or you simply bottle early and release the bottle into the market. Now, guys, this is a really, really 101, because there is at least over 100 decisions a winemaker needs to make
There could be a full podcast
in this
on
whole, that's a
wine
whole
production.
different, that's a whole series
Yeah.
of podcasts, right?
Yeah.
That's like 100 episodes of how to make wine. But and then in case of red wine, the only subtle difference is that you need the color from the skins when you're making red wine. So you want the color and you want the skin in the same vat where the fermentation is happening, because during that fermentation, the skins give color, they ooze tannins, and all of this is needed for red wines. And so that's it. You take the grapes, you crush, you ferment, you then press, and you then separate the skins. And then most red wines are put through some kind of maturation in oak, because oak and red wine are kind of sort of best friends. And oak gives this lovely texture and mouthfeel to red wines, not to mention the tannins and these beautiful flavors of vanilla and toastiness and coconut and sweet spice, which consumers all over the world love. And so you put it in these oak barrels, keep them for maturation anywhere between 6 months to 2 years. And then you take it out and you bottle and you release.
Yeah.
in the market. And rosé, as Anish correctly pointed out, you don't do it by mixing white wine and red wine, although you do that with the making of champagne.
In
So
this,
Veuve Clicquot rosé is made by
Veuve
mixing red
Clicquot was
wine and
made that
white
way.
wine.
Yes. Yeah.
But typically what you do is you start off with making a red wine, but you remove the skin very quickly within a day or two. Just as the color is starting to leach out from the skins, you wait, and the minute the winemaker says, okay, here's a little bit of pink, and I'm happy with this color, you remove the skins and you finish off the rest of the fermentation like a white wine. So rosé draws from the best of the reds and white wine. It's like a red wine that's disguised like dressed like a white wine. And I love rosés because they really have the freshness of a white wine, but they still offer a little bit of that depth of a red wine. They're incredibly food compatible. They obviously are meant for all seasons, not just the summer season. And they're beautiful. Like I always say, when in doubt, drink rosé. You can never go wrong.
I very recently, and I'm thinking I'm very late on the bandwagon of tasting orange wines. And I had a lot of that in Georgia because they do that a lot with their white wines. And again, if you can explain orange wines, because orange wines are not made from orange before anyone
No.
thinks that.
Orange wines are wines that are macerated on their skins, and it's a completely different category. Very unfortunately, orange wines haven't come to India at all.
I'm wondering why Indian producers are not doing it, because I think our climate,
Can lend to it.
I think it'll be great.
Yeah.
It's one step, like it's in that rosé direction, right? Where it's still
It is.
chill, it's just got more character.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm actually starting to think some of our Indian sweet wines are almost a little bit like rosé wine. Sorry, not rosé wine, orange wine, because they are leaving the skins on maceration for a long time. Some of them even actually literally look orange because of the extra oxidation. But it's interesting we don't have any imported wines that are orange wines.
No.
So it's a real shame, but it's a growing category. I get a lot of it when I go to England for my holidays, and it's making steady strides. But for that matter, Anish, we don't even make organic wines in India.
I think Indian wines for me is how do I say this politically correctly? I think with my journey when I got into all of this, right? In fact, my company that time was called Indian Wine List, and the whole idea was to let's just explore Indian wines. And like when I was trying to do that, all the wineries didn't even have proper bottle shots. So I actually got every bottle of wine from Nasik and did a proper photo shoot, so at least we could have proper pictures to catalog everything.
Yeah.
But I think with Indian wines, at least my view is that you're always told that there's the promise, right? In 5 years it'll become this, in 5 years it'll become this. And to me, Indian wines never became cool. And to me, it's fairly squarely on the producers. But Indian wines, like how Indian craft spirits are cool, Indian mixers are cool, like everything is
cool.
You're excited
why
about
are
it,
Indian
right?
wines
But
not
Indian
becoming
wines
cool?
never became cool.
Yeah, that was you're absolutely right, because I framed that question exactly with the similar thought process, but I framed it slightly differently. And I remember I asked this to Rajiv Samant, the founder of Sula, at Vinexpo in Mumbai last year. And I said, look, you have 65%, 62% market share. You have the lion's share of the market. And Indian whiskeys and Indian gins and Indian vodkas and rums and every beers, handcrafted beers, all of them are becoming so fashionable, trending, growing market share, giving the international wines, or the categories of drinks a run for their money. So for whatever reason, if Indian wines are failing, not as a market share. Look, India drinks 75% Indian wines.
Yeah.
So I'm not talking from a market share point of view, but I'm talking from an imagery point of view. If they're failing, then isn't it upon Sula? I'm not sure you like the question, but but I said, is it not true that then you carry the mantle?
Yeah.
You carry that responsibility. But having said that, I was recently at Sula Vineyards. I spent a night. I went with the whole team. It was great. I think what they've done with their tourism is
amazing.
astonishing.
Yeah.
Like they're almost now touching 100 rooms to stay, for people to stay. It's incredible, the accommodation facilities and the whole 360-degree experience. And it's such a hub of converging cultures, people from all cultures and socioeconomic strata sort of landing up at Sula Vineyards and enjoying a glass of wine, and some stay there and so on. The tourism business is really enviable.
One one of the few Indian wines that I happily take to anyone's house. And again, this more from an image point of view, right?
Sure.
Is the Source Rosé. I
Yeah.
think that's a fab wine.
It is. So the Source Rosé has consistently scooped awards at the India Wine Awards. We started India Wine Awards, a tasting competition in 2017. And we ran 3 very successful editions before COVID happened. And then we came back with our 4th edition with a big bang in 2022, last year. And it's the largest tasting of both Indian and international wines, tasted by the most qualified wine palates of the country. And Sula Grenache Rosé, since its launch, has been scooping gold and top awards every time. And I think it's really won back a lot of customers who gave up on Indian wines.
Yeah.
I get that a lot everywhere I go, even at social parties, including the South Bombay elite circles. They all sort of endorse the Source range overall, the rosé, but also some of the other wines.
Yeah.
And that's the point. I think when I was speaking with Rajiv, I think the entire direction of the company now is steering very clearly towards focusing on premium range of wines. And so my sincere advice to everybody would be that when you're drinking Indian wines, it's best to stay with the premium range. And every wine producer in India has a premium range of wines, whether it's Source and Rasa for Sula, or Anokhi for Valone, or the Junoon and the MS range for Fratelli, or the Charisma Estates, which only has 3 labels, but every single one is brilliant. And Rivello has Reserve. Or with Grover Vineyards, that makes the Signet range of, high-end Shirazes aged in amphora vessels. All fascinating stuff. I think that's the high-end is where the wine producers of India are really putting their passion and their craft and their understanding behind, creating these labels. So I would urge consumers to stay in that range.
But I also think the landscape changed so much for a consumer today because... Sorry, my voice just cracked. I'll say it again. I also think today the landscape's changed so much for the Indian wine consumer that I agree with a lot of these wines, but I don't agree with their price points necessarily.
I know.
Like if I just look at Junoon's price points, those are expensive wines, right?
I agree.
And then in that range, as a consumer, I have everything available to me. So I think Indian wine companies do have a little bit of a task cut out that if you're pricing wines for 3,000, 4,000, there's pretty serious competition of wines that are available.
I totally agree with you, Anish. I think there's a golden opportunity and a big market and a void that exists for any wine producer that decides to launch a hardcore varietal label, well made, good quality, fresh, nothing very complex, nothing very nothing age-worthy or cellar-worthy, nothing too complicated, but just a simple, well-made, bang-for-your-buck sort of a wine. And if he prices it between $500 to $600,
that'll be
he will scoop the market.
Yeah.
Scoop the market, like completely. And I think that's, to my mind, where the real market is, the opportunity is. Unfortunately, we don't have that.
Globally, at that price point,
we have a lot of fuddy-duddy stuff at that price point right now, where because there are lack of rules and lack of regulations in India, I can never say with full confidence if that Moscato is a Moscato, or that Viognier is a Viognier, or that Chardonnay is a Chardonnay. And I therefore tend to sort of stick with my premium range.
We'll take a little break. I want to get into how to read a wine label.
Okay.
So I think that's always an interesting one, and some recommendations.
All right, then.
Cool. All right, we'll take a short break and we'll be back after these messages.
Hey everyone, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. Listeners, presenting to you Club Vartalab, the premier tier offering for our podcast. Here you get a number of perks like access to extra bits and clips from the episodes, completely unfiltered, uncut and raw. The chance of watching or listening to the full episodes 2 days before the official release. And absolutely free of cost entry to the Vartalab Just Us live shows. That's right, stories in person. Occasional live streams of the episode tapings on YouTube, an exclusive members-only Telegram group with Akash and Naveen, and you also get your name on the producer slates at the very end credits of all the video episodes. So go to youtube.com/@Vartalab and click on the join button to become a member now. On Cyrus Says, Cyrus is joined by actress Mithila Palkar. They talk about her endeavors in mainstream acting, theatre and regional cinema. And we also get to hear her sing some beautiful songs for us. On Think Fast, Varun and Suchita are joined by Pranav Mani of Brain & Co. They talk about culture from a Gen Z perspective and what appeals to this generation. And on Vartalab, Naveen and Akash are joined by poet and writer Preeti Vangani. The trio talks about the different scams that are happening over the world and the problems with the society. Once again, do not forget to visit our merch store on ivmpodcast.com. We've got some super cool and exciting stuff over there for you and your loved ones. Follow us on social media. We are at IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. If you like our shows, then do not forget to spread the word. You know, it really helps us a lot. And of course, don't forget to rate and review our shows on whatever platform you are listening to them. All our video shows are also available on youtube.com/IVM Podcasts. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Cash Repayments and HDFC Mutual Fund. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Welcome back to Aneesh Thing. I'm with Sonal Holland. We are talking about wine and drinking some beautiful rosé, Veuve Clicquot champagne. Sonal, let's get into reading a wine label. Well, that's again another interesting one because at least in India, we don't have that much of a retail experience either, right?
No.
There are very few stores where you can go where someone can explain things to you.
Correct.
And there are so many occasions where you just don't have anyone to talk to, or at the max you'll perhaps Google that wine to figure it out. But how does one go about understanding a wine label? Some terms that you should definitely be careful about. Yeah.
Careful. So one word for sure to be very careful about is reserve. Everyone likes to call their wine reserve, but other than Italy and Spain, the word actually means jack shit. In Italy, it means higher quality and a wine that's more aged, more complex. It means something in Spain too, similar, more aging requirements. But anywhere around the world, all it is it's an expression given by the winemaker for the wine that he believes is a good wine. You know, it's his best wine, or a higher quality wine.
Yeah.
But then it's like, your interpretation of high quality versus my interpretation of high quality, right? And they could mean two entirely different things. So reserve, because it's not a regulated term, it's often used as just a marketing term on labels. So one should always remember that doesn't mean anything. Another word I would say to look out for is the word Chateau. So Chateau word came into use during the 1800s and predominantly in the Bordeaux region of France, where some of the wealthiest vineyard owners who owned castles on their land started naming their castles as Chateau. And so that kind of meant Chateau XYZ meant all of the holdings, the entire property, the vineyards, everything. And so because it was a term that originally was used by some of the wealthiest castle owners and vineyard owners, the name came to be, the word came to be associated with high quality wines. But then as soon as it was realized by other wine producers that Chateau word sells on a label, even those other wine producers who didn't own castles or did not own any such thing on their vineyards started using the word Chateau. And now I find even wines from China or wines from outside of Bordeaux or France now blatantly use the word Chateau. Again, Chateau word is used as an interpretation of the wine producer's high wine, his interpretation of his best wine. But that's a very relative term. It doesn't control how the grapes are picked, at what yields, how well it's made, whether or not it's been aged, and what is the quality of the grape material that's gone into making of the wine. So again, Chateau is not a regulated word, but it sells. Like in India, when I go to people's homes, some of the people who are more well-traveled, more affluent, they all tend to say, I'm serving Chateau this and I'm serving Chateau that. And I'm looking at these Chateaus and they don't mean anything.
You get a lot of these at duty free. A lot of cheap Bordeaux that'll say Chateau something.
Exactly. And whilst there is a lot of great value to be found in Bordeaux, outside of those classified Grand Cru Class A wines, I wouldn't pass that. But yet we all also know that there's a lot of overproduction of wines in Bordeaux, where wine is even cheaper than water. It's so much overproduction, they don't sell, and not all of it is great. So one always cannot be guided by this one word and so on, right? And then, of course, other than that, I would say some of the important cues on labels are I look for alcohol levels increasingly now because of climate warming. I'm very conscious of that because I feel that alcohol directly impacts the style of the wine. And high alcohol wines do tend to be more fuller, more warmer on the back palate, and they're often not as refreshing to drink. So if I'm having it with food, maybe I'll want a wine with a bit, maybe it can stand a bit of alcohol with higher level. But if I'm going to have it as an aperitif and I'm just having it for a casual sort of a brunch party, I'm looking for things that are lighter. So, low alcohol wines like, when I say low, I mean like moderate levels of alcohol like Prosecco or Champagne or wines from cooler climate. German Rieslings, they kind of are lovely for something more casual or something to drink or enjoy on their own or to enjoy with lighter foods. So I look for alcohol levels. And other than that, of course, the mention of a grape variety is always very helpful for consumers because people are familiar with names of grape varieties. So if it's Chardonnay, I know what to expect. If it's Merlot, I know what to expect. So it helps for consumers to get slightly familiar with names of at least the 8 key grape varieties. And if I can just quickly mention them, it's Pinot Grigio, Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc and Riesling in whites. And in reds, we have the Cabernet Sauvignon, Pinot Noir, Shiraz and Merlot in reds. So this pretty much is 80% of the wines around the world. So if you at least are familiar with the style of wines made by these 8 important globally available grape variety wines, then you kind of tend to get a bit more comfortable
Let's
with
take
what's
this one step further. Can you just give me a one-line descriptor of all of these 8? What should one expect? Again, typicity or something like that, right?
Yeah. Chardonnay, let's start with Chardonnay. Chardonnay is the queen of, very important, among all white grape varieties, one of the most important. Very versatile. It can grow in cool climates of Chablis and very warm climates of South Australia or California. And it's very adaptable to the kind of climate it grows in. So in a Chablis, it'll be very lean, steely, refreshing, mouth-watering. In a warm climate, it can be very buttery, toasty, and it's often called a winemaker's delight because a winemaker can dress it up with oak aging, lees maturation, lots of other techniques at the winery to adapt it. So Chardonnay lends itself beautifully to a winemaker's interpretation and passion. And so it can be very, very different in style. But generally speaking, loved by all, grown all over the world, extremely easy to find, brilliant. Just like when in doubt, just, sort of go with Chardonnay. Pinot Grigio is neutral. It's kind of muted. It's not very fragrant. And its unobtrusiveness and its lack of personality in many ways makes it very food compatible, makes it very, if you're having like a large party of 100 people and you're trying to please all 100 people and you just don't want to steer towards any controversy of aromas or flavors, then just go with a Pinot Grigio. You know what I mean? It's a crowd. Because if you give a Sauvignon Blanc has a very divided camp. There are some people who love the aromatics of a Sauvignon Blanc. There are others who are like, I hate the greenness, I hate the pungency of a Sauvignon Blanc.
Blancs?
Sorry?
Which camp are you on?
I like my Sauvignon Blancs ripe. I don't like them green, but I like them slightly on the stone fruit or riper. And then, of course, I love the Sancerres and stuff, but I don't like them very green. And I find a lot of wine producers tend to make very green, herbaceous, pungent Sauvignon Blancs. I definitely don't enjoy that style.
You're just describing Nasik, right?
Okay, Aneesh. Yes, but so I don't like that. I like a more riper expression. So that's what a Sauvignon Blanc is, just very aromatic and green and grassy and so on. Not always very food compatible, but goes brilliantly with more green foods, like palak paneer and wok fried, stir fry veggies and stuff like that. And then we have, what was the 4th variety?
You're the MW.
I know. But just what were the 4 I mentioned? There was Riesling. Riesling is a beautiful grape variety, extremely versatile in sense of they produce wines from absolute dry to sweet. And I think this is something consumers need to know because consumers tend to think Riesling, that must be sweet. No, not all Riesling is sweet. And if you're looking for a bone dry Riesling, you should definitely go to Australia to try a beautiful Riesling because they're mostly dry. So they're very versatile in that sense. They make They are so beautiful. They don't need any oak to dress up. They don't need any lipstick. They don't need any makeup. They're just beautiful naked on their own. But they're fussy to grow. They're cool. They only grow in cooler climates. They don't do very well in warm climates. So they only grow where they can grow well. So that's your white grape varieties. And in the reds, of course, the king of black grape varieties is your Cabernet Sauvignon. Makes among some of the most expensive red wines. But fairly versatile. Also makes among the world's cheapest red wines. It can grow, but only grows again in hot climates. Needs a lot of heat. So I would say if you're trying a Cabernet Sauvignon, drink it from a warmer climate, because chances are that'll be nice and ripe and round with smooth tannins. Because if you sort of go to a cooler climate for a Cabernet Sauvignon, you might end up with something very vegetal and green and unripe, which again won't be fun to drink. Merlot is, again, Cabernet Sauvignon's best friend. Merlot often blended, but on its own, when it's fully ripe, it's round, it's fleshy, it's plummy. It's the feminine version of Cabernet Sauvignon. Much easier to drink as opposed to Cabernet Sauvignon because the tannins are much rounder. So it's just a nice plump, red wine to drink. And I would say go to Saint-Emilion, of course, in France. But if you're looking for New World, Chilean Merlots come out really well. Yeah. Well-made Chilean Merlots are superb. In Pinot Noirs, I would say, so Pinot Noir is like the Riesling in the black grapes. It's just the most elegant and fussy grape, and it grows where it grows, and it likes to be treated well. Very high maintenance grape, but when they are looked after, they produce some incredibly elegant, posh, sophisticated, long-lived wines. And I would say the best examples come from either the Burgundy of France, which is the homeland of good quality, high quality Pinot Noir. But another country in the New World that's giving Burgundy a real run for their money is New Zealand. Yeah. And the New Zealand styles are much more powerful, more rich, more ripe. So if you like that, a bit more extracted, deeper style, then I would say New Zealand Pinot Noirs are brilliant. And finally, Shiraz or Syrah. They both mean the same thing. Their names are exactly the same grape variety. Bit peppery, full bodied, rich, opulent, expressive. The ones that come from the French side, which is the Rhone Valley, the northern Rhone, they tend to be a bit more peppery and elegant, whereas the ones that come from the Barossa Valley or McLaren Vale regions of South Australia tend to be just very forward and rich and expressive and full and spicy and chocolatey and all of that. So whatever names I'm throwing, guys, whatever resonates with you, go with that. That's
Let's talk about tasting wines, because I think the view in a lot of people's head is that wine tastings are these super formal, very manicured sort of things.
Yeah, act.
And I do think that you can never look elegant when you're wine tasting. That's just
You think so?
You're always spitting, you're making noises, you're doing all sorts of things. Never elegant.
Yeah. Well, the spitting is not elegant, but again, like they say, it's a lot of people also think spitting is an act of snobbery. Like you're trying to be like a snob and trying to come across like some very accomplished, intelligent sort of a wine intelligent person when you do that. But actually, the whole purpose of spitting is to just remain sober. Because sometimes at professional wine tastings, like at wine judging competitions that I have been to in London, at Decanter World Wine Awards, for example, we're tasting as many as 80 to 100 wines a day. Now, if I started drinking all those wines, even if it was one sip per glass, which it never is, that would be an awful lot of wine to just drink. I'd have to be carried back to my hotel room before lunch. So sometimes you just spit to remain sober. I always say it's not an act of snobbery, it's an act of sobriety. But it's just not the most elegant acts. Yeah, but there are also people who compete on who can spit the longest and furthest.
What parties
it's a whole skill on its own. I think it's mostly the sommelier parties, the guys who are doing the master sommelier exams. Yeah, so it's like who can spit the farthest. So, and I know that our legend Steven Spurrier could spit quite further away.
Steven Spurrier has been a very influential person for me in my journey for wines.
Has he?
Thanks to Wineside of India.
Yeah.
You end up getting access to him a lot.
Yeah.
And this one trip to Vinexpo Bordeaux, we were going somewhere we were invited for this dinner at Mutter Rothschild, which was again incredible. We're like,
Yeah.
how the hell are we even
Here.
here? And we were on the same bus as him, and we told him Piyush knew him well because of Wine Society, and Piyush was like, we're going to Loire and Champagne after this. And he's like, give me a napkin. He just wrote down names. He said, go to these people, just say I've sent you.
Oh,
And we just went cold calling winery to winery saying, hey, Steven sent us.
yeah.
And man, what an
And
experience.
all doors open,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a real legend. I had a lot of respect and love and admiration for him myself. And in many ways, Anish, I'd like to say he was also ahead of his times. He
Yeah.
spotted India and its potential as a market well ahead of any other
Yeah.
global wine critic. He was here with the Wine Society of India. And unfortunately, although that venture didn't run for long, but nevertheless, he chose to be actively involved in very early stages when the market was very nascent, very, very nascent. So I appreciate that about him.
And then he even worked with these guys, Fratelli.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
collaborated with Fratelli for the MS label. So
Yeah.
for those of you who don't know, the MS stands for Marsi. M stands for Marsi, who's their wine producer, Piero Marsi, who's a Tuscan winemaker. And the S of the MS stands for Steven Spurrier.
Yeah.
And now they call it the Master Select because unfortunately both Mr. Marsi and Spurrier have passed away. But
So this gentleman we're talking about, Steven Spurrier, there's a whole movie about his story, about Judgment of Paris.
Mhm.
I'm forgetting the name of the movie right now for some reason. Wait, just for a moment.
Sideways.
No, not
no.
Sideways. What's the movie called?
Judgment of Paris वाला मूवी का नाम क्या था?
Bottle Shock.
That's it, Bottle Shock.
So there's a movie called Bottle Shock. It should be on Netflix or one of the platforms for sure. Which is it's based on Steven Spurrier's story and that whole event called the Judgment of Paris. In case you can say a line or two about that, like just to meet someone who was that influential, who led to that.
Yes, so the Judgment of Paris in 1976, when Steven Spurrier, the legend, organized this blind tasting of some of the best wines from France and pitted them against the best wines of California and Napa Valley at a blind tasting. And shockingly so, some of the Californian wines were rated higher by some of the top wine tasters around the world. And this result really shook the world of wines very much. But what it did amazingly was to bring Napa and California overall, placed it on the world map so powerfully. And there was no looking back for them, for their fortunes after that. He literally rewrote that history, for the Californian wine industry. And they're forever indebted to him.
And if you look at the movie, you should definitely watch the movie. If you're remotely, forget being into wines, just being into food for that matter. Like if you look at the story, they almost threw the wines away because they thought the wine was not fine because the color changed because of some process or something they explained in the movie. But that winery was almost going to sell all of that wine in bulk or throw it away. Till they got a call saying, no, we won over here. Please don't throw those wines.
I know. But I remember once chatting with Stephen on a one-on-one, and he even said to me that after that episode, the Judgment of Paris tasting, he also started receiving death threats. And I'm not sure we should even be saying that on this
badass
podcast,
industry.
but like a real badass industry. It really shook the world of wines. But what a great thing to do. What an amazing thing to do. And it reminds you again and again not to be prejudiced, not to jump ahead of yourself, and only ever trust your own palate and trust what's in the glass. If you just remain true to that, you can actually become such a great taster, and it's not that difficult. Anybody can become a taster if you just decide to remain true to your palate and only judge the wine by what it is in the glass.
Tell me, beginner wines for people to try. We went through the 8 main varietals that you're saying would be bulk of the world's production. But let's say I'm a complete newcomer. I want to buy a rosé, a white, and a red. What would your suggestions be? Could be grape varietals, could be particular brands, could be anything.
I'm happy to give you brands, but I'm happy to give you names of some of the wines that won Best in Show at the India Wine Awards as recently as 2022 November.
Perfect.
Right? So we have 30 Best in Show. I'm obviously not going to read out 30 names, but let me start with Indian, right? So if you're looking to have a nice white, you could try the Sula Dindori Reserve Chardonnay.
Yeah.
That's lovely, actually.
That's a
I've
good
tried
wine.
that
Yeah,
wine.
yeah.
And if you prefer something lighter, then the Grover Zampa Art Collection Chenin Blanc 2022, really nice and fresh. Surprisingly, there was a new producer this year who scooped an award for his Chardonnay called the Virgin Hills. Have you heard of them?
No, and that's also out of Nasik.
That's out of Nasik. It's a new team of two brothers, Chug brothers, and they call themselves Virgin Hills, and they just launched a Chardonnay, and it straight away scooped like a Best in Show.
Nice.
It was a real surprise
I will pick that
for
up.
everybody. So yeah, for those of you, just pick that up. If you all enjoy sparkling rosés like Anish and I do now, as we are doing right now, you could try the York Sparkling Rosé. That actually got the Best in Show at the India Wine Awards. And then for lovers of reds, guys, you could do the Rasa Syrah. That's nice and elegant. You could definitely do the Charisma Syrah. But pre-warning, it's only available in the state of Karnataka and Goa. And Goa, not available in Maharashtra. The Junoon Red did all right. And in the imported wines, the international wines, I would say some of the well-known names were the Penfolds 389 Shiraz from South Australia, which people refer to as the baby Grange. Grange is one of their most coveted, age-worthy. In fact, it's Australia's most famous wine. So the baby Grange is the Penfolds 389, bin 389. That was lovely. Then the a Lebanese wine one. So
That's available here.
yes, Chateau Moussard, Jean de Chateau Moussard, 2000. Let me say that again. Jean de Chateau Moussard 2019 scooped a Best in Show this year, and I'm forgetting who the importer is, but
Yeah, I want to find out who the importer is.
but nice, right? That India has a Lebanese wine available now. I think the only country where we don't have a wine from now is China, actually, Anish. But
There
I've
was
asked a lot of importers, do you want a Chinese wine in your portfolio? And they're all like a firm no. So I don't know what's going on there.
To me, the big surprise recently was, again, Georgian wines.
Yeah.
Don't get any of those.
Yeah, we don't have Georgian wines. We should have a Georgian wine. But hey, coming back,
Yeah.
if you love New Zealand, which you have to love,
You have to love
you
New
must.
Zealand.
There's a new brand in town called the Escarpment. Martinborough Pinot Noir. Martinborough is a region, forget about that. But Escarpment Pinot Noir is a new wine in town. And another really nice wine in town is the Thorbreck. So Thorbreck is a South Australian wine producer, counted among the top 20, top 50 wine producers around the world. Really great reputation. And they have a number of wines, but their most enjoyable everyday drinking sort of wine is Woodcutter Shiraz. So that's a lovely wine. And that's a lot of choice, right? And if for lovers of Italy, you can do the Bottega Amarone della Valpolicella.
Favorite wines.
I know,
Oh,
right?
yes.
And what else? Okay, none that comes to mind. That I urge all wine lovers to not be stuck with one label.
Yeah.
And not have a go-to wine, if I may dare say, because there are so many labels of wines around the world, millions of them, waiting to be discovered. And there's no such thing as, because this is an expensive wine, it's a better wine. We've all dispelled that myth a long time ago. So I think even if we all decided to ourselves that I'm going to try a different wine every night for the rest of my life, we would never have to come back to the same wine twice. So the idea is to, yes, Anish doesn't like that because Anish wants us to drink beer and...
No, someone had pointed this out to me once. We were at a winery.
Yeah.
And they're like, you see the wines in this tank, this one particular, just one tank, right? I was like, yeah. And he was like, if you had a bottle of wine every day, you would still not finish that tank.
Exactly.
I was like, damn.
But that's just one quantity of one wine. What I'm saying is that just so much diversity and so many labels to be discovered that we really ought to do justice to ourselves and the world of wine by trying a different wine every now and then and just continue to discover new things. Because if you're stuck with this one label that you're in this comfort zone, then you're really not enjoying and making the most out of the world of wines. And also you're creating a very limited palate. Because you're only, like if you're only drinking Pinot Noirs, you're never going to be able to appreciate the big, bold, chewy wines, wines of the world.
That's like cigar snobs.
Right?
I'll meet so many people who think they're very cool and they will say stuff like, "Hey, I only smoke Cubans."
I know.
I'm like, why?
Yeah, and I hate the snobbery around anything for that matter. The other snobbery thing is like, oh, I only drink Italian and French. I mean, what's wrong? What's wrong with drinking Australia or California or Chile? I mean, there's so much great quality wine to be discovered everywhere around the world because there are so many amazing wine producers who have so much passion for the craft, and there's no serious advantage that Italy or France has. Trust me, I'm telling you this today. There is no serious advantage Italy or France has over other countries that are making good wines. So I will always be an advocate of, drinking better and perhaps even drinking less. Like drink less but drink better.
Oh, always. That goes with every single thing.
Yeah.
Sonal, how do people find you on social, and what are the kind of courses that beginners could do with you?
So we have a couple of handles, but my personal handle is Sonal Holland _Master of Wine on Instagram. And Aneesh, I'm hoping that by the time our podcast is over, we've touched 250,000 followers.
That's amazing.
Because we're literally inching towards that as of today. Yeah. So we're very excited. And hopefully this podcast recording will be a good luck charm for us. And we're very excited because we're very proud to say that we are the most followed wine page in the country.
That's really cool.
Yeah, thank you. And of course, we have Sonal Holland Wine Academy, which is the academy business, the education business, which we've been in since 2009. And we have our website, sonalhollandwineacademy.com, has a host of courses, both for trade professionals as well as for enthusiasts. And we continue to produce more and more courses because what we really want to do is make world-class education on wine accessible to one and all. And we're probably among the world's most affordable courses too, by the way. Some of our own proprietary courses are as inexpensive as like 2,000 rupees a course. But it's with the knowledge level is I've put in everything I know out there. So if this podcast has been any minute demonstration of that, I haven't held back in any way, and I've used all my understanding of wine in giving it out freely and generously in these courses. And we want to really revolutionize the wine culture, and we want to meet the consumer and the people and the market where it is at. Like we want to groom the whole nation from the grassroots level, because we see the next 10-year journey as probably the most exciting for wine, because wine is suddenly this new media symbol of sophistication, success, elegance, elevated living, aspirational living. And India is at this trajectory where we all want better, we all want, and wine sits in that ecosystem quite nicely. And we want to steer that journey for the wine-loving consumer. And the Academy, Sonal Holland Wine Academy, is here to be your guide through this journey.
That's amazing.
Thank you. We just crossed 250.
Oh, amazing.
Okay, there you go.
Cool.
Okay, I'm going to drink champagne to that.
Wait.
Cheers.
I'm going to top up mine.
Amazing. Thank you.
I've been drinking way faster than you have. Well, here's to 250K.
Thank you so much.
Very, very
Thank
cool.
you. That feels great.
Okay, so we're going to celebrate the 250K followers apart from champagne, but with, and I don't say this lightly, this is my favorite beer.
Oh.
And this is, I'm very curious about everyone trying this.
Okay. Have you got only 1 pint for all of us?
Yeah, I only have 1 pint with me. So
how generous, Aneesh.
This is a Belgian beer called Duchess de Bourgogne.
Can I see the label?
Yeah.
It's quite fascinating. Ooh. Wow. Chocolate cherry, the Duchess.
So this is the Christmas edition. It's basically all these beers are wild fermented.
Okay.
So you get a lot of funk, and this one is a mix of beers aged in oak for 8 months and 14 months. And it's just, they're funky, fruity, bone-dry beers.
Wow. By the way, that reminds me, Aneesh, weren't you supposed to take me on this beer trail
We will do the
half
beer
a decade ago?
Now we can do it at home because we can get the beers.
Perfect.
Earlier we had to...
Your place or mine?
Done. We should 100% organize that. But thank you so much.
That. Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time out. Thank you for being here. And we'll drink more beer soon, and we'll drink more wine
We'll drink
soon.
some more beers and we'll drink some more wine.
Cheers to
Never
that.
the same again.
Yeah.
Twice rather. Cheers.
Cheers.